Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Like a lot of actors, Matt Damon has a weakness for silly, fashionable politics. But otherwise, he seems like a decent enough guy, certainly by the standards of the world he lives in a business where stars often behave like demanding children, a place where Harvey Weinstein was long considered a moral leader. Matt Damon stands out. He's apparently well-liked by just about everybody he deals with. He gives generously to charity. He's been married to the same woman for 12 years. They're raising 4 daughters. No one's ever even accused him of sexual misconduct, but suddenly that doesn't matter. Matt Damon's career is now in jeopardy. More than 20,000 people have signed a petition calling for producers to cut Damon from his latest film. That movie's already been shot, but the petition demands that any evidence of his voice or image be removed from the film in the editing booth. Other people are saying Damon ought to be denied future film roles, and he may well be denied those roles. What exactly did Matt Damon do to so thoroughly destroy his reputation in such short a time? Well, last week he gave an interview to ABC News about the wave of sex scandals in Hollywood. No, he didn't defend sexual harassment in that interview. He didn't suggest the accusers are lying. He didn't say anything remotely like that, though you'd never know it from the coverage, which in some cases omits any of Damon's direct quotes. So we'll let you decide for yourself what you think of Matt Damon's views. Here's what he actually said to ABC News.
I do believe that there's a spectrum of behavior, right? And we're going to have to figure out, like, what, you know, there's a difference between, you know, patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation, right? Both of those behaviors need to be confronted and eradicated without question, but they shouldn't be conflated.
Damon went on to say this: we live in this culture of outrage and injury, and we're going to have to correct enough to go, wait a minute, none of us came here perfect. We're in this moment, we're at the moment, and I hope it doesn't stay this way. The clearer signal to men and to younger people is deny it, because if you take responsibility for what you did, your life's going to get ruined. All of that behavior needs to be confronted, but there is a continuum. And on this end of the continuum, where you have rape and child molestation or whatever, you know, that's prison. That's criminal behavior, and it needs to be dealt with that way. The other stuff is kind of shameful and gross. I don't know Louis C.K. I've never met him. I'm a fan of his, but I don't imagine he's going to do those things again. You know what I mean? I imagine the price that he has paid at this point is so beyond anything that I just think we have to start delineating between what these behaviors are. End quote. There it is. Now, there are a couple of incomplete thoughts in there. There's a line or two your average publicist would advise you against expressing in public. But ask yourself, and be honest, how much of that do you actually disagree with? How much is hateful or immoral or otherwise beyond the pale? None of it? Exactly. There's not a single sentiment in that entire paragraph that's not defensible, or that 90% of the American population would find over the top or outrageous. It's all within bounds, or it would have been last year. But because a handful of Twitter users don't like it, the rest of us have to pretend that Matt Damon is somehow guilty of something awful. And if we don't pretend, we may ourselves be seen as collaborators of whatever crimes he supposedly committed and forced to share his punishment. It's terrifying and it's corrupting. This is how reason dies. We're watching it happen. Most of us are too afraid to say anything about it as it happens. Meanwhile, the least reasonable, most extreme voices get louder by the hour. Yesterday, actress Rose McGowan ordered the media to stop using the word alleged when describing claims of sexual misconduct. In other words, everyone accused is guilty. If you deny that, you're guilty too. Weirdly, almost nobody in the media pushed back against Rose McGowan's demand. Before long, they may have to obey her. She has nearly 1 million Twitter followers. She's calling the shots. Let's just be honest about what's happening. Social media are driving this insanity. They're making mob justice the rule and clear thinking impossible. Large portions of our population, and ironically, they tend to be the best educated portions of the population, are now addicted to outrage, virtue signaling, bandwagoning. Social media did that. It turns out it's not that helpful to know what every famous person in America is thinking at all times. It just makes us all crazy and less content. A few weeks ago, former Facebook president Sean Parker admitted that the website he helped found, Facebook, quote, literally changes your relationship with society and with each other. Parker was right. It is all shredding our social fabric before our eyes. Remember, you have an absolute right to say what you think is true. Other people might not agree with you, but that's okay. It doesn't make either of you evil or mean you ought to be fired from your job. It just means you disagree. That has always been true. It was true before smartphones, and no matter what they say on Twitter, it's true now. Joining us now, radio show host Tammy Bruce. So, Tammy, I never thought that I would defend Matt Damon, and I'm not actually really defending Matt Damon. I'm just defending the proposition that you can say something that other people disagree with without being fired for it. And we seem to have lost that.
Yeah, indeed. Look, I also loathe him. He's said some things about the president and about others, which politically I very much disagree with. I don't know him. But he seems to me to be like the blind squirrel here. Every now and then you find a nut. And he's found one, because he's right. And you're absolutely right in your assessment leading into this. But as a feminist, here's also what I see in this regard. And I've been arguing from the beginning here that we need to be careful, as I saw the attempt to conflate guys being jerks with guys who are actual predators. Yeah. And the women involved in this and the people on the left argue that, well, we don't want him and others to trivialize these serious allegations. But you know what really trivializes them, Tucker, is when you do compare a man, let's say, calling you beautiful as you walk down the hallway, or maybe rubbing your back, with an act of rape. That trivializes those survivors, what they've been through. And I think that, as most people understand that, as we listened to, as you read what Matt Damon said, and this is now our challenge, because this is what the left always does. They use a serious issue that people, we know it has to be dealt with, and then write it, and then abuse it. They go too far. It's like the French Revolution. The people begin to do things simply because they can, and they use it for revenge, or because they can't stop their rage, and then everybody's going to have to pay. Jodie Foster, I think, said, I saw a headline the other day, that every man over the age of 30 is somewhat culpable for the sexual harassment we now face. I have found in my life it's been men who have been most helpful and the most decent to me, with women not necessarily being so. So this is an issue of behavior. It's not an issue about men or sex, even, as we know. It's about control. And I think that unless we get a handle on this and have an honest conversation, you're going to have the left once again shredding an important issue like sexual harassment and sexual assault, because they don't know, they have no boundary of what's important, and then conflating everything and then just simply vomiting their rage out on everyone.
Exactly. And it diminishes the experience of people who really have suffered. I mean, if you lost your legs in an IED and I closed my hand in a car door, and I say to you, we both kind of suffered in the same way, you would say, no, actually, I have my legs blown off. You broke a finger. They're not the same. Yeah. And look, there are different things in the workplace and the seriousness. Workplaces clearly are dealing with that. But with single voices who have perhaps originally some very important things to say, and then something changes in that framework, because they should not be conflated. These things are different. There is a continuum, and certain voices, hopefully voices like ours, will remind people of these things and make sure that we don't have a wholesale, effectively a beheading of everyone who the left doesn't like or that feminists don't like, because then we're all going to lose. That's exactly right. Let reasonable people speak. Tammy, you are a reasonable person. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for doing that. Appreciate it. Dr. Carol Lieberman is a psychiatrist and a frequent expert witness in sexual harassment cases, and she joins us tonight. Doctor, thanks a lot for coming on. Thank you. So things are moving really quickly in our attitudes collectively about sexual harassment, sexual assault. What's the downside to this, potentially?
Everything is really out of control. This has become such a bandwagon. Now, certainly there are a lot of women who have been sexually harassed, have been sexually abused. You know, a lot of these things are valid. But I think the problem is that there are some women who have joined this bandwagon who have not been sexually harassed or abused, but who are angry at men for their own personal reasons and have extended this way beyond what the original concept was. I mean, we're now going into the American values of free speech and presumed innocent. You can't have that anymore. People are being tried in the media because of these allegations. I mean, now you're not even supposed to say allegation. I mean, that is absurd. And I mean, so Matt Damon you know, here he's because he was connected in some way to Harvey Weinstein, because he didn't speak out against him. Now people are going after him because he's a friend or a coworker. I mean, where does this end? It's like 1984, and it's eroding our trust. Men and women, you know, for women to have power, it's not to be like men or to make men feminized, you know, to make them, to take away their power, to castrate them. I mean, that's essentially what's happening. It's better to be able to work together in an environment, share both of the things that each one has that can add to the other. It's not about, I mean, yes, certainly women deserve, there's been pay discrepancies and all these kinds of things. These are true. But to go about it in this mass hysteria kind of way, and to take away things that we really need to rely on, as I said, like presumed innocent and free speech, is just going way beyond what this calls for.
But I also suspect, in ways I can't completely articulate, that some of the victims in this are going to be women down the line.
Yes. You know, this is not, people are not looking, women are not looking at this for the long term. There is going to be effects, you know, women are going to be hired less because men are going to be afraid that they're going to accuse them of sexual harassment. Really, what is even more powerful is, if we're not allowed to hug or flirt, or, I mean, the relationship, the love relationship, and I'm not saying that a harasser and a victim, you know, that's a love relationship, but, you know, love has actually been under fire now for a while. I mean, there's no dating anymore. People are going to websites, internet, and so on. No flirting. I mean, we're really losing a lot of what is good, or was good, between the relationship in the.
And we're not pausing to think of the consequences, unfortunately. Dr. Lieberman, thank you. I appreciate your insight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lawmakers demand